So, David, welcome back. You've just been on holiday.
I have been, and haven't you been on holiday, or have you been working, mate?
No, I've been filled with all kinds of anxiety that since you've been gone, I keep on checking the news, and I'm fired with all these things, and I don't think you're allowed to go on holiday again, mate.
I think checking the news is very bad for you. If I'd known you were doing that, I'd have stopped you.
I've pinged you a load of stuff.
And most of it, I have to admit, I didn't look at.
Yeah.
I was on holiday.
Well, that's
it's the
what
definition
I mean.
of holiday.
Yeah, no, okay. Well, I'd like a bit of help in dealing with some.
All right, come on then. Let's tell us the collective lunacy which has popped up while I've been away.
Okay, I will do after this. Hello, thanks for joining us. My name's Ian Stroud.
And my name is David Malone. And this is Hyperland.
Yes, well, I don't know where to start, David.
You've been listening to the news again, haven't you?
I have, and I'm
How many times have I told you it's bad for your health?
I thought it was quite good to sort of look at where we are in terms of Hyperland.
All right.
I haven't kind of forgotten that my research before we started off was 80% of all podcasts fail, which is a good start.
Have we failed?
No, and we're still here. We're still doing it. We've got people listening, and my biggest surprise is they're all over the place. I was expecting like maybe a couple of people on the Wirral.
You're the one with all the software, so where are people listening?
Okay, all right. So we've got predominantly United Kingdom, but there's about 10% of listeners are from the United States.
All right, okay, that's nice.
6% from Italy. Similar amount from Australia.
Italy?
Maybe it was that Jonathan's podcast.
Could be.
I don't know.
Maybe they're all from Unicredit and they're cursing us.
Well, I wish they bloody were, and I wish they'd given him some money, because I mean, that was a great podcast. The only thing, I think he told the story really well, but I kind of feel as if the story that we didn't tell was the 16 years that has gone by, and he's still dealing with it. It would be nice to get him back on, but yeah, 4% from Ireland, Japan, Singapore, Belgium, Germany, Sweden, France, Greece, Poland, Switzerland, Canada, India, Colombia, Czech Republic, Netherlands, Qatar, Thailand, Ireland, Isle of Man, and Jersey.
Well, I'm glad to know we've got a few money lenders listening.
It's a good. Well, it's a global reach, but yeah, no, I think we're doing all right.
How many have we done?
There's been 10 now. The most successful one was probably Jonathan's, because I think he retweeted it, and his 1 million followers. I think 3 of them joined, so we doubled our audience. No, I'm joking. Yeah, I think Jonathan's was but the other ones, the bird flu. And I think this is part of the issue that I've got. I still try and explain what you were talking about in bird flu. And I sometimes I'm aware of a little kind of, flat earthers, bit mad.
Yeah.
But
I agree with you.
The sort of traction now that we're seeing, and this was the point, Sky and the BBC were both reporting about disease X and Porton Down and
yeah, well, they're still trying to run a different kind of narrative. You know, the narrative they want is the same one that they were using to justify all the work which they were doing before COVID at Wuhan and other places, and all the NIH and the rest of it. They dreamt it up basically around 2009, and the people who dreamt it up were essentially the same people who then signed either the Lancet letter or the Proximal Origins.
Yeah, well, I kind of wanted to come back onto Fauci and some of the emails and things. But before we do that, I mean, I'll just, some of the things I fired over to you were Reuters were reporting Namibia abandoning poultry imports from Denmark and Netherlands due to bird flu. The WHO has come out 12th of July with a statement sort of saying, yes, there is a possibility that it's an ongoing risk to humans. The CDC, Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention, I'll put a little link on. They did a kind of quite interesting article on a bit like the bird flu podcast that we did. I'm looking forward to possibly getting Sinatra on to.
Yeah, I've contacted her. She's interested in talking to us, but
It's purely for validation. It's purely for people to sort of take. I mean, one last thing on bird flu before we go on to Fauci. Actually, was in the podcast you said that you've given him a strict instruction to your three boys that if there's any outbreak of bird flu, that they drop everything and they join you and you start locking down. I mean, how much truth is there in what happens if something does break?
Well, I mean, I was actually wondering if we shouldn't do a podcast, a sort of a fictional one, because if you look at what happened in 2009, which although the outbreak was in pigs, it was bird flu. It was called swine flu because the outbreak was in swine flu. But what you can see there is in 2009, we already had most of the systems that we currently have in place for governments to alert their own population and other governments. So the way that outbreak unfolded gives you a perfect template for how the next one would.
Yeah.
And the Americans found out very, very quickly that this was a bird flu and an unusual one. All the systems worked perfectly. Someone came in, they were sick, they were swabbed, went to the local clinic, they realized it was bird flu, but it wasn't one that they had antigens for. So they sent the sample straight to the CDC.
Yeah.
CDC got back to them and said, yes, this is an unusual bird flu, and everything swung into action.
Yeah.
Really, really exactly as it should do.
All boxes ticked.
Yeah. Nobody wasted any time, and yet it spread to 153 countries in about 9 weeks.
They fly fast, them more birds.
Yes, indeed. So, if you look at that, what it says is, if we had an outbreak of bird flu in a country that has all the systems in place, so America, Britain, most of Europe,
yeah,
and that has a track record of actually doing what it should do, which is to tell everyone, unlike China, which has a long track record of doing exactly the opposite. So if the outbreaks happen in China, things will be a lot worse, and that's not me being anti-Chinese, it's me being anti the Chinese government's bureaucracy, which I am against.
Yeah, and possibly just you being honest, because I think we've seen it.
But what I was just going to say is that we know that if there's an outbreak of bird flu, it will spread via air traffic very, very quickly, and it will spread no matter how good the warning systems are, because we had a good warning system in 2009. It's not that much better now, just more countries have joined in being better. But you won't stop it, because even if on the very first day they decide that it's bird flu, it would already have probably spread to most of the big air travel centers already.
Yeah.
There was a study out very recently which actually said, we think the mortality rate from, if it was an H5N1 bird flu, would be about 60%. I've been using a figure of 50%.
Yeah, you mentioned 50% in the podcast.
Yeah, well, they're looking at it and saying it could be even higher. So that's why I said to the boys what I said. It sounds sort of science fiction-y, sort of, Mr. Prepper, slightly silly.
Yeah.
But it's not. Bird flu is that dangerous. We have no vaccine for it. It's already immune to at least one, probably two of our antivirals. We don't have that many antivirals.
Yeah.
We certainly don't have the stockpiles.
Okay.
In anything like it. So in other words, if it starts, we already know from the 2009 version that it will spread. It will certainly spread through all the major air lanes, which is Britain, Frankfurt, most of the big nations. It'll already be in.
So the sensible thing would be to try and stop it. And one of the links I sent to you was about France. I think in October they're going to start a vaccine program for the poultry. Is that right?
Yeah, this has been going on for a while, and the experts are quite divided about it. On the one hand, it will cut down the number of birds who get sick.
But then they're still spreading it. It's the sickness the vaccine will sort out. They might not
but
die of it, but they'll still be spreading it. That's the issue. Okay.
Exactly. So what it does is it will stop the massive impact that it has on the industry. And by the industry, I also mean the consumer, because if they have to slaughter 100 million chickens, then chickens get slightly more expensive. It will hurt the people in a country that relies on their domestic production. It means people will starve. And even in countries where we won't starve, the cost will shoot up. So people will get hungry, even if they're not starving.
Yeah, I mean, we're already in a sort of food.
We're already in that situation.
Yes, exactly. That's the point.
So it will do that, but the argument on the other side is, as you said, it doesn't stop them shedding the virus.
Yeah.
So it doesn't stop the virus from continuing to evolve.
Yeah, the mutation.
So, yeah, and will we end up with a situation where birds that are shedding the virus will still be traded and that will spread the virus? Answer probably yes, given the bountiful examples of exactly that happening.
Yeah.
So I'm not informed enough to take much of a view on that. All I can tell you is that the scientists involved are really very divided.
Yeah.
So I don't know I think what we can say is it's not going to solve the risk to human beings.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, one other thing that's sort of come out recently is Chernobyl.
Yeah, okay. I've been friends with someone who's followed the Chernobyl story for a long time, but without going into it in great detail. Mm-hmm. After Chernobyl, there was a bunch of scientists in Belarus, STScI and a couple of others, and they worked in children's hospitals, and they noticed massive increase in childhood cancers, leukemias, and lots of genetic disorders. So kids being born that look very much like thalidomide babies. And there was a lot of work done, good scientific work done, and a lot of data, just massive amount of data from all these hospitals. Mm. And that data has never really seen the light of day.
Yeah.
I started following that shortly after Chernobyl, and the small group of scientists in Belarus who figured in that really good HBO drama.
Yeah.
And that was a wonderful drama.
Yeah.
But it did still give you the impression that this was a Russian cover-up. And of course, the Russians did cover things up.
Yeah.
But since then, it has not been a Russian cover-up. It's been a Western cover-up. The science which has been available, the massive amount of data, has essentially been suppressed by Western science. And I don't say that lightly, but you can document the suppression, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Right.
And it's the same kind of suppression of science as you...
this is leading us now.
Well,
our next favourite.
In COVID, it's the same thing. But before we get onto it, I just wanted to go back to finish off what I was just mentioning in the narrative that's still being run about disease X.
Yeah.
Because the narrative was there. The narrative they want is there's all these dangers out there. That's why we've got to go out and go to bat caves and sample bats and bring them back and do all the work, and then do all the gain of function work to decide what it would be like if it became able to transmit. That's their justification.
Yeah.
And they're still peddling this justification. And I think it always was very thin, and I think it continues to be very thin, because there are hundreds of thousands of diseases. So if we went out and sampled 10,000 dangerous diseases, brought them back and started doing gain of function, there's no guarantee, in fact the odds are against us, that all we've learned will be of any use whatsoever for the next outbreak.
Yeah.
So there's something about that doesn't ring true. I think it's more just that the virologists want to do virology and get the funding for it.
Can you explain this gain of function?
Yeah, I mean, gain of functions, needless to say, because it's become very political, various interested parties have tried to start to change what the definition means.
Yeah.
But essentially, in its simplest, gain of function means you take a naturally occurring virus and in the lab, you give it an ability it doesn't have in nature.
Right.
So you give it a new ability that could be to transmit between mammals or to transmit amongst humans. So you add something to it.
Yeah.
And the reason you do that is you say, what would we have to add to it? What is it lacks? What is it that would have to evolve in order to become a pandemic danger?
Mm-hmm.
And then the notion is, once we've created the monster, we'd then be able to create the antidote to the monster.
Yeah.
But, you have to create the monster. And then having created the monster, if it gets out of the lab, then you have created the thing you said you were defending us against, a thing which didn't yet exist until you made it.
Yes.
So you can see the problem. And the justification is, well, this is the best way of defending ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I find unsettling about it is that has always been the justification for chemical and biological warfare. Of course, we're not going to make a dreadful poisonous chemical, but other people might be. So we need to make it to understand it, to make the vaccine for it.
Yeah.
And the fact that means we've made it, well, let's gloss over that. So I find it unsettling that that same structure is being used to justify this work. And it further bothers me because that justification of, well, these things are out there in nature, it's the standard environmental line. And I do think the environmentalists have been useful idiots in this, that they've said, well, we're chopping down the rainforest and this is where all the diseases are. So we then go and live in the rainforest and that's where we're getting new diseases.
Yeah.
Well, COVID didn't come from a rainforest that anyone was chopping down. COVID didn't come from anywhere in nature where people were suddenly moving in. So it doesn't fit that. And the weight of circumstantial evidence is clearly that it wasn't there in nature, and then we got it because we chopped down the rainforest and moved in where we shouldn't be living. It was created in a lab in a major city.
Yeah. Well,
so that narrative is the one they want to keep running, and it means you're distracted from the narrative of what actually appears to have happened, and that's just. Yeah, that's worrying.
Well, distractions are an ongoing thing, but neatly goes into Fauci in terms of that. It was the gain of function research in Wuhan that.
I mean,
emails.
Yes, exactly.
And messages on something like WhatsApp. It's called Slack, but one of them was from a scientist, Christian Anderson. I'll just read it to you.
Yeah.
He says on Slack, 1st of February 2020, I think the main thing still in my mind is that the lab escape version is so friggin' likely to have happened because they were already doing this type of work and the molecular data is fully consistent with that scenario. February 2020.
Yeah. And just a handful of days later, he signs the proximal origin saying to even suggest that it came from lobbyist conspiracy theory and you're on the verge of racism and you're just undermining science and the international order of things. And what we do know is that between him writing that email and him signing the proximal origin, there was no new data.
Yeah.
So nothing new came across his desk. Now, you might say, how could you possibly know that? You weren't there, David. Yeah. You didn't see his desk. Maybe something came across that was top secret. It's true, all true. But if something had come across his desk, which was the smoking gun, to prove that it had a natural origin and to completely knock on the head all the things, the possibility, would they not have published that? Would they not have told us? Would they not have said, here's the proof?
Yeah, totally.
Of course they would. So they haven't, so there wasn't.
My worry is I found out about this on Sky News Australia. I couldn't. I kind of searched over here. I looked on BBC website. I looked on the Sky website over here, And it didn't seem to be anything about it. Why are we not discussing it in the UK?
Well, because the sort of the media, who you might sort of call them the progressive, they champion all the progressive causes. So let's call them progressive. I don't want to call them left wing, because I don't think they are left wing.
Yeah.
So I've got to search for another name, and I'm volunteering progressive as what to call them. They've got their narrative, and their narrative is it came from nature, and everything else is xenophobic, if not racist, and it's anti-science. And they've dug themselves in so firmly to that narrative. I don't see how they get out of it now. I mean, I still think it would be better for them right up to the 11th hour, just to go, we were wrong, we were massively wrong, we apologize, we grovel at your feet. But I'm not sure they're going to. I think they're just going to keep doubling down, even though there's now it's not even a trickle. It's a steady flow of things like that. Email from Christian Hansen, and there's a lot of others. Drosten, all the people we mentioned, as being that coterie, and there's just no two ways about it. They said one thing, it's so friggin' likely, and then the next they're saying no, absolutely, we've looked and it's scientifically. I don't know what else you call that other than a lie. I really don't. I mean, it beats me how they could do that in all conscience.
Yeah.
The only way I can see it is it boils down to the greater good. Somewhere in their mind they're saying, I know this is a lie. I know I'm perjuring myself. I know this is undermining people's faith in science, which is what worries me.
Yeah.
But somehow they think this is justified because of some greater good. I don't know what they think that greater good is.
Yeah.
But I don't see any other explanation for it. As we said back then, and it's true, there isn't actually a single shred of scientific evidence that COVID had a natural origin.
Yeah.
Not one piece. All there is to say, in the past, novel diseases or diseases that made the jump have done so from a natural origin.
Yeah.
But that's just a general sort of statement.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was true in a world before we had gain of function technology.
Yeah. Well, you've somewhat calmed me down a little bit. I'm feeling less anxious, or am I feeling more anxious? I'm not too sure. But going back to Hyperland and kind of how we've had a little break, and you've come back well rested. What apart from Chernobyl, I can point to one request that we've had from somebody. Caroline Lodge from the Wirral got in touch, and she said, have you or are you about to record anything on AI? And at which point I had to confess.
Go on then.
We have recorded a podcast on AI. In fact, we've done 4. And okay, I'm gonna be honest with everyone, but we recorded one, and I thought I was really on fire in that one, but you felt that you missed some important points out. So it is a complex subject. So we did a second one, and I think we both agreed that one went probably a little bit better. At which point I looked down to stop the recording and realised I hadn't started it. So by this time, Angel Delight is seeping from my ears, and we do a third one, which was terrible. To do a fourth one after that, and when I listened to it back, it just sounded like do you remember the Muppets, the 2 old men sitting up in the box?
Yes.
This coffee tastes like mud.
Yeah.
It should do. It was ground this morning. It was that kind of, so there is another AI podcast coming soon.
Yeah, I think we should do one.
Yeah. Anything else in mind?
Yeah. I really like to do one about our current state of democracy. There's the WHO one. So the Chernobyl one, which does, of course, include the WHO. I'd like to do one on asteroid mining.
Okay.
Which does sound a bit, if you pardon the expression, out there. But these are more speculative ones. I'd quite like to do somewhere rather than here's a massive amount of research which proves the case.
Yeah.
Some things which are just looking ahead and are just more speculative, because I think there's a number of things like asteroid mining which are going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think it's interesting to try and look ahead and say, well, why is it going to happen? Who's going to do it? Who's going to benefit? What changes will it make? And I think that's quite I looked at this quite a number of years ago. And funny enough, the first time I did, I got Hollywood interested. Well, Jeff Goldblum had said he would be happy to front it.
Wow. Have you still got his email address?
Yeah, it was a classic learning experience. As I had this project and I kept mentioning it to people, and they kept getting enthusiastic, and each of them made it grow bigger.
Yeah, yeah.
To the point that it got so big I couldn't possibly control it, and then it went pop, and that was the end of it.
Yeah.
But this was about a decade ago, and things have carried on being really interesting. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about that.
I think it would be interesting. I mean, that's the other feedback that I've had from multiple people, which is, my God, isn't David clever?
Well, all right. No, David just reads widely.
No, but the thing,
what David does.
Yes, but David is clever. I'm saying that, but I think actually the more I heard it, I started to hear, "Aren't you stupid?"
Okay,
and do you know what?
That's not fair. But
what was even worse than that was we got some pictures up on Instagram to try. I mean, we're dinosaurs when it comes to social media, both of us. But got some pictures up on Instagram, and the next comment that came through is, "God, isn't he good looking?"
Okay, we can stop this right now.
I know, but it was kind of like, all right, okay, so yeah, I'm the stupid, ugly one of the pair.
I wouldn't feel bad. I think they just need to go to Specsavers, mate.
Well, on that one, I'm looking forward to keeping this going. Let's not.
Well, listen, I mean, what I'd quite like to do is to do some that are speculative and looking ahead.
Yeah.
And others, I think, well, a bit like this one, that are sort of a miscellany of stuff, because there's lots of things that come up which you'd think, oh, I don't want to do a whole podcast on that, but it'd be good to talk about them.
Well,
stuff that's in the news. So I think we should do a couple that are sort of the miscellany of the news of recent moments.
Well, I think as this one's proven, there are some things that need a bit of a better explanation of what's behind a news story, but also we're not hearing some of the news in terms of Sky.
Sky is interesting because the Sky in Australia absolutely just held out, and they are right wing. There's no two ways about it. But that's the weird place we're in, is on certain topics, the right wing are the only one who will touch them. Now, you could say, yes, and I don't like the way they talk about them.
Yeah.
And some of that is certainly true. But my response to that is, well, then stop leaving it to them to be the only ones addressing this topic.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you're leaving a vacuum. Should the progressive or the left-wing press have talked about the scientific possibility that COVID leaked from a lab? Yes. Did they? No. Yeah. So there was a vacuum, and therefore the only place where people could go to read about it was the right-wing press. So you can't then complain about the right-wing press.
Well, to be honest with you, I see the news and the headlines, and I read them, and where they come from. I don't want us to say I don't care where they come from. I mean, you quite often refer to the Tory graph. I'm just like, I'll pick up the Telegraph to see the football scores. They're not going to lie about that, are they? Yes, but
no, I don't think so.
I kind of, there's a caveat of where are we hearing things from that we need to understand and address. But you're right. I mean,
I'd like to talk about what's going on in Ukraine, but I'd quite like to do that now, really, as part of this miscellany. I think that's what we should call this one.
Well, I feel quite strongly is not the word. what's happening in the Ukraine? I went to Crimea in 2012. On my bucket list has been St. Petersburg, Moscow. I'd love to go out there. I don't think I can do it justice in a sort of rambling.
No,
The history
but
of Crimea
I
is.
just wanted to say one simple thing,
Go
really,
on.
which is that, and I've noticed it beginning to come up. Did you see in the headlines that there was a bit of a to-do between the leader of the Ukraine and NATO, because at a recent meeting, NATO said, well, we think
Yes.
that the Ukraine might need to compromise with Russia on some of the territorial questions, and in return, they'd get membership to NATO.
Yeah, I think Stoltenberg, is it?
Yeah, I can't remember his name, sorry.
He's come back and sort of said, no. That shouldn't have been said.
Yeah, but I think it was said, and I think they'll say it again.
Yeah.
And this is just my thought on this, is that regardless of what you think is right or wrong, there's a certain realpolitik element to this. And if Ukraine said, look, we want the whole East back because, you invaded and
we want Crimea as well.
Okay, I could see some kind of compromise being reached with Russia, because although there are lots of ethnic Russians there, Russia has not behaved well, and I can see that the international order, such as it is, will back them and say, okay, Ukraine, you're right, you should get that back. But if Ukraine then says, and we want the Crimea and we want Sevastopol, I see that as a nuclear flashpoint, because it is the home to Russia's nuclear fleet, the nuclear fleet which they use for basically for the Mediterranean and all points that you can get to through either going out the Med or down the Suez.
Yeah.
Is Russia going to give one of its only, I think it's 3 ports that can house a nuclear fleet away? Are they going to say, it would be like saying to Russia, imagine if there was an independence movement that sprung up in Hawaii and said, we want you out. We want to control this port, and we want the American fleet out. Is that really going to happen? I don't think Russia would ever agree to that. And to insist on it, I think you are then approaching a nuclear flashpoint. And so I think that's, as soon as I've been thinking about this for a while, because it just seemed so obvious. And then when I heard this fellow from NATO saying this, okay, there you go. They're beginning to talk about it, because I think someone will have to say to the Ukrainians, you're going to have to dial down this rhetoric. The problem is, domestically, it would be very unpopular to dial down that rhetoric. And we helped create this rhetoric that, Russia's completely in the wrong, and I think they are in the wrong. But I cannot see Russia agreeing to that. And I think it might be the place where the West has to say to Ukraine, no, you're going to have to let them have their nuclear port. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting thing, because I suspect that's going to shape some of the politics of what goes on in Ukraine in the next few months.
I think I can't remember exactly when the elections are coming up for Putin, but I think that's the next potential big change.
But I think whether Putin was in charge or not, for Russia to agree to give up its only really southern port for its nuclear fleet would be such a massive thing. I mean, I do think something will have to be done about that rhetoric. Yeah,
it's not a sort of bite-sized thing that I can get my head around in terms of the whole history behind Crimea and why they were largely Russian-speaking in Crimea anyway, was largely to do with Russia moving people there.
Of course, yeah. I mean, the large ethnic Russian majority in the east of Ukraine, the part that they initially invaded, it's a very large, I think it is possibly majority ethnic Russians. And you could say, well, yes, but they were moved in there by Stalin, which they were. Yeah. But that's quite a while ago. So there's 2 generations that have been born there, and it's where they live.
Yeah, no.
So
Yeah.
what do you say? I mean,
Well,
if you say they've got to go because they weren't there originally, you're in a sticky wicket when it comes to talking about Israel.
well,
And no one's going to say that about the Israelis, nor should they.
okay. Well, that's I'm looking forward to all of those. I think we should wrap.
I think we should too. All right. Well, good to talk to you again.
Welcome
mate.
back.
And,
nice having you back. And just for any listeners, both of you, Facebook, Instagram, Substack, and is where David is writing his pieces, and there's links to the podcasts there. Thanks for listening.